In cybersecurity, a dead man's switch is a fail-safe mechanism, a system that activates when the operator can no longer perform a routine action. For the past 2 years, my entire company had been running on one, and no one knew it but me. I was the senior systems administrator at Vanguard Shipping, a logistics firm with a complex global network. My job was everything digital: servers, cloud instances, security, uptime, infrastructure, all of it. I had built the entire system from a fragile mess of outdated hardware into a fast, secure, and stable network. My boss, Greg, didn't understand any of it. A non-technical manager who climbed the ladder by cutting budgets and talking slick in meetings, he saw IT as a drain, a cost center, not a core function. As long as things worked, he didn't care how or why. He never read technical documentation, never listened when I explained preventive maintenance. He liked to say, "Why spend money on IT if nothing ever goes wrong?" A year ago, our company adopted a toxic hustle culture. Suddenly, being a team player meant working weekends, nights, and holidays for free. Greg thrived in this culture. He loved the power it gave him to demand more time and labor without giving anything back. It started with late-night texts and weekend emergencies that weren't really emergencies. Then came the guilt trips. "I just need people who are all in, Jess," he'd say. "It's about commitment, not clock watching." Things came to a head during a massive server migration I had planned for months, a complex weekend job requiring overtime for me and my team. I submitted the standard request for extra pay. Greg called me in and stared at the form like it was a dirty rag. "You're asking for extra money for this?" he asked, disappointed. "We're making a big investment here, and you want overtime?" I calmly explained that this was normal. Our team would be working 20+ hours outside regular business time. His response was a cold stare and a thinly veiled threat. "We'll have to reevaluate your commitment." What Greg didn't know was that the entire network was operating with a quiet heartbeat, an automated system I'd built into the infrastructure. Every day at my company laptop would log in, authenticate with the servers, and distribute an encryption key that powered dozens of critical background tasks: database reindexing, temporary file purging, certificate renewals, and more. Without that key, the scripts would fail, systems would stop self-maintaining, and after 48 hours, the internal and external security certificates would expire. Locking everyone out. It wasn't sabotage. It was a protective measure, a fail-safe, in case of a breach or a total admin lockout. I had documented everything in the disaster recovery manual Greg never read. He assumed the system was magic. He had no idea. It relied on a daily signal that only I could send. The migration went smoothly. We worked. We got paid. But I could feel Greg was looking for his moment to strike. 2 weeks later, I got a meeting invite. No context, just a time and room number. I walked in to find him and an HR rep waiting with that familiar corporate execution setup. "We're going in a new direction," he said coldly. "Your position is being eliminated. Your access has already been revoked." Greg believed this was checkmate. By locking me out before firing me, he thought he'd protected the company. What he didn't know was that by doing so, he had just taken his finger off the dead man's switch. I packed my things, including the company-issued laptop, the only device that generated the daily key, and walked out. At that moment, Vanguard Shipping had exactly 48 hours before the entire system I built would quietly, automatically shut itself down, and no one left in that building knew how to stop it. Saturday morning was unusually peaceful. No emails, no late-night server pings, no anxious texts from Greg. My company-issued laptop sat untouched on my kitchen table, quietly running in sleep mode. I didn't rush to update my RSUM or fire off-job applications. Instead, I took a long hike. I watched a movie. I slept better than I had in years. For once, my weekend belonged to me. No passive-aggressive guilt trips, no corporate gaslighting. I had been cut off from a system I built, but Greg didn't realize that the moment he revoked my access, he triggered the very security protocol designed to prevent what he was now experiencing. 8 a.m. sharp on Saturday, the first silent warning appeared on my laptop: heartbeat key renewal demon, handshake with primary DC failed, retrying in 24 hours. That was expected. My computer, no longer able to connect to the network, had begun its countdown. If it couldn't reach the servers again by Monday morning, the key would expire. The system would lock down, not maliciously, not destructively, just silently and completely. By design.by Sunday morning, the second and final warning blinked on screen. Final handshake attempt failed. Key will expire at 9 o'clock Monday. System integrity will be compromised. I took another sip of coffee, watching the warning disappear. The dead man's switch was doing exactly what I'd built it to do, ensure that no one could run my system without understanding it. Greg thought he had taken control. In reality, he had just unplugged the only person who knew how to keep the engine running. Monday morning arrived with a slow, deliberate calm. At 8:45 am, I logged into a public network monitoring dashboard, a site I often used to check service uptime across the industry. I typed in double quotes vanguardshipping.com and watched as the domain appeared. Green lights everywhere. For now. At exactly 9 o'clock am, the switch flipped. One by one, green lights turned red. Vanguard's main website, offline. The internal VPN, down. Email servers, dead. Client tracking portal, gone. The company's entire infrastructure, its global communications, logistics systems, data servers simply vanished from the digital map. Not because I attacked it, but because the system's trust certificates had expired. And without a valid key, no service, no browser, no operating system in the world would accept a connection. The beauty of the system wasn't its destruction, it was its silence. Nothing was deleted, nothing was corrupted. The servers were still humming, but every door had locked, every gate closed. The system was in digital hibernation, awaiting a new heartbeat. But the only person who had ever known how to supply it was now gone. At 9:15 am, my phone rang. I didn't need to look at the screen. I already knew who it was. Greg. His voice was barely coherent, a frantic, high-pitched panic. Jessica. Oh, thank God everything is down. The site, the emails, the client portal, it's all gone. We're dead in the water. What's happening? I sipped my coffee slowly. I'm not sure, Greg, I replied, my tone calm and professional. As you said on Friday, my employment at Vanguard has been terminated. I don't have access to anything anymore, but you're the only one who understands this system. He practically shrieked. Did you do something? Is this some kind of sabotage? I kept my voice neutral. No, Greg, I'd never sabotage anything. But the system does have a number of automated protocols. Did you consult the disaster recovery documentation I wrote? Chapter 4, Section B outlines the certificate renewal process. That would be a good place to start. The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Greg had never even opened the manual. He was realizing now just how much he'd depended on the quiet, invisible work I did. He thought I was expendable. He was wrong. Jessica, please, he begged. Just come in, just for a few hours. As a consultant, we'll pay you whatever you want. We're losing millions every hour. I'm sorry, Greg, I said gently, but I can't. You made it clear that I'm no longer authorized. It would be a violation of protocol. Besides, I added, letting just a hint of satisfaction color my voice, I don't think I'm feeling like a team player today. I think I need to focus on my work-life balance. You understand. Then I hung up. An hour later, the next call came. This time, it wasn't Greg, it was the CEO of Vanguard Shipping. I had only met him a handful of times, but his voice was immediately recognizable, steady, authoritative, and now lined with quiet urgency. Jessica, he began, bypassing any pleasantries. Greg has explained the situation, or at least his version of it, but I have a strong feeling I'm not getting the full story. He seems to believe you're the only person on earth who can fix this. Is that true? I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, just long enough for the weight of his words to settle. The system was built with a series of layered security protocols, I finally said. Those protocols require authenticated operator activity to maintain essential functions. When my credentials were revoked on Friday, the automated lockdown process began. It's all in the disaster recovery documentation I prepared before I left. If Greg reviewed it, as he claimed, none of this would be a surprise. He sighed heavily. He told us he understood the system top to bottom. That was optimistic. I replied evenly. There was a long pause. Jessica, what would it take to get the system back online? I leaned back in my chair. I had thought long and hard about this moment, not just over the weekend, but during countless late nights when I stayed behind fixing problems. Greg never noticed, patching holes. He never appreciated. And now, for the first time, I had all the leverage. A one-time administrative key must be generated using my old work laptop, I explained. That's the only device configured with the secure daemon capable of generating the master key. Once generated, it can be distributed to the necessary systems to restore service. And you have that laptop? He asked. I do. What are your terms? This was it, my moment. Not just for justice, but to set things right. My consulting fee, I said, will be double my previous annual salary. Upfront, non-negotiable. In addition, I want an independent audit of the IT department's leadership and budget allocation, conducted by a third party. And finally, a full written apology from your office, acknowledging the systemic failures that led to this disaster, and the termination of someone who was protecting your infrastructure. The CEO didn't even flinch. Done, he said. You'll have the agreement within the hour. That afternoon, I returned to the Vanguard shipping headquarters not as an employee, but as a consultant. The office was a ghost town. Employees had been sent home. Phones rang unanswered. Laptops sat idle. No emails, no logins, no shipments. The entire machine had stalled. The CEO met me at the door himself, shaking my hand with quiet respect. Greg was nowhere to be seen. In the server room, I set the laptop on the central rack and powered it up. It took exactly 15 minutes to initiate the daemon, generate a new master key, and propagate it across the critical systems. As the key synced, status lights shifted from blinking red to steady green. One by one, services came back online. Email flowed. Portals opened. The heart of Vanguard shipping began to beat again. The CEO stood beside me the whole time. When the last light turned green, he simply said, "Thank you." I nodded. "You're welcome." Greg, as I later learned, was terminated before the day was over for gross negligence, failure to follow security protocols, and misrepresenting his competence to senior leadership. The independent audit I requested uncovered years of underfunding, ignored upgrade proposals, and records of unpaid overtime requests denied across the IT department. Vanguard Shipping had to restructure their leadership and approach to digital infrastructure from the ground up. As for me, I didn't return to the company. I had no desire to be part of a culture that saw tech workers as disposable. Instead, I used the generous consulting fee and the story spreading rapidly through industry circles to launch my own cybersecurity and systems consulting firm. Within days, I had contracts lined up. Everyone wanted the person who had not only predicted the collapse, but had engineered the perfect safeguard against it. And my first client, Vanguard Shipping, they rehired me not as staff, but as a partner. They now paid top dollar for access to the expertise they once took for granted. Greg had tried to punish me by taking away access. What he didn't realize was that access isn't power, understanding is. I built the house. I wrote the blueprints. I installed the locks. And when he tossed me out, he didn't just lose the key, he locked himself inside a machine he never really understood. It was a strange feeling, watching the company I'd once worked tirelessly to keep running now depend on me as an external savior. The same building where I used to dread walking into on Monday mornings now felt different, empowering. This time, I was no longer the silenced voice in the background. I was the architect, the one who had built the backbone of a system no one else truly understood. Vanguard Shipping was back online, but not untouched. The financial damage was substantial. Millions in lost revenue, broken client trust, and scrambled emergency contracts. The internal chatter was louder than ever. Board members were furious. Shareholders wanted answers. And the story? It spread like wildfire. A cautionary tale of how underestimating technical staff could cost an empire its foundation in a matter of hours. The CEO personally oversaw the forensic audit I had demanded. Emails surfaced. Documents were reviewed. It became clear that Greg had repeatedly overridden maintenance proposals, delayed crucial upgrades, and refused overtime compensations, all while claiming that the system ran itself. The audit ended with a scathing internal report. Greg's name was attached to nearly every avoidable failure. He wasn't just fired. His severance was rescinded. His reputation in the industry shattered. Meanwhile, I officially launched my own firm, Keyframe Systems. The tagline? We don't just build systems, we build safeguards. I hired some of my old teammates who had been underpaid and underappreciated. Word of our story opened doors quickly. Within weeks, we were consulting for 3 mid-sized logistics firms and a national healthcare provider that wanted to modernize securely. One particular afternoon, about 2 months after the incident, I received a surprising message. It was from the CEO of Vanguard. He wanted to meet again, this time not for repairs, but for a proposal. Curiously, I agreed. We sat across from each other in a neutral coffee shop where he offered a bold idea. Jessica, he said, we want to rebuild our IT leadership the right way this time. No politics, no Gregs. We need vision, discipline, and accountability. Would you consider coming back in an executive role? I paused, stirring my drink. You mean back inside the building? No, he said. We'd want to retain keyframe systems, but we'd like to make you our CTO externally contracted, with full executive authority over infrastructure strategy. You wouldn't report to anyone but the board. It was tempting, a poetic full circle, but I'd already tasted freedom, control, respect. I didn't need to sit in a boardroom again to have impact. I appreciate the offer, I replied, but I'm not interested in titles anymore. What I care about is systems that work and people who are empowered to do their jobs well. He nodded, clearly disappointed but respectful. Then let's keep working together, he said. On your terms. We did. And as we signed the new long-term consulting agreement, I thought back to the moment Greg had fired me with smug certainty, never once imagining the entire digital empire was running on trust. He didn't earn. That evening, I returned home and opened the company-issued laptop I had kept in perfect condition, now just a memento. The demon had long since been disabled. The system moved to a new, resilient model my firm had designed, but I kept the original scripts, the heartbeat key, the architecture that had changed my life. I thought about how often companies view people in tech as machines expected to work nonstop, expected to be grateful for being allowed to serve. But the truth is, the real machinery isn't in the server room. It's in the minds of the people who keep it all running. Greg believed control meant ownership, but control in the hands of the ignorant is just a countdown waiting to expire. And me? I was never the virus. I was the failsafe.